It was 11:43 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday night in Ouagadougou. The bustling capital of Burkina Faso had settled into peaceful slumber, with most citizens unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. Street vendors had packed up their wares, children had been tucked into bed, and the usual sounds of the city had given way to the gentle chorus of crickets and the distant hum of generators powering the few establishments that remained open. Inside the presidential residence, a fortress-like compound surrounded by high walls and vigilant guards, President Ibrahim Traoré sat hunched over his mahogany desk. The weight of leadership was evident in his tired eyes, but his mind remained sharp and focused. The warm glow of his desk lamp illuminated stacks of documents that required his attention: budget proposals, diplomatic correspondence, and development plans that would shape the future of his nation. Traoré had just finished signing approval for a new school construction project in the northern provinces when his secure phone began to ring. The sound cut through the silence like a knife, its urgent tone suggesting something far more serious than routine government business. Without hesitation, he reached for the encrypted device that only a handful of people had access to. "Yes, this is the president," he answered, his voice steady despite the late hour. There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by the sound of someone taking a deep, trembling breath. When the voice finally came through, it was barely above a whisper, clearly terrified but determined to speak. "Please, Mr. President, I know this line is dangerous, but I had no choice. I couldn't let this continue any longer." Traoré leaned forward, his full attention now focused on the mysterious caller. "Who are you? How did you get this number?" "I cannot say my name, sir. My life would be in danger if they knew I was calling you. But please, you must listen to me. There are children, more than 200 of them, trapped in conditions that no human being should ever endure." The caller's voice cracked with emotion, and Traoré could hear the genuine anguish in every word. "Where? What kind of conditions?" "They're being held in a secret illegal gold mine somewhere in the eastern region near Compiègne village. These children, sir, they're dying. They work with their bare hands, digging in mud and rocks from dawn until deep into the night. They're treated worse than animals. Some of them are only 5 or 6 years old." President Traoré's expression hardened, his jaw clenching as the full horror of what he was hearing began to sink in. As a father himself, the thought of children suffering such abuse made his blood boil. "Where exactly?" "Give me precise location details," the voice continued, growing more urgent. "Follow the old forest road past the abandoned timber mill. You'll know it when you see it. The roof has collapsed, and there are old machinery parts scattered around. Behind the mill, there's a narrow path that leads deep into the forest. Nobody goes there anymore because people are afraid. Please, Mr. President, you're the only one who can stop this nightmare." Before Traoré could ask more questions, the line went dead. The sudden silence left him staring at the phone, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just heard. For a moment he sat motionless, processing the gravity of the situation. Then, with swift determination, he pressed a button on his desk that connected him directly to his security chief. "Get me General Abba immediately. Also contact Commander Idris. We're mobilizing tonight," he ordered, his voice filled with a controlled fury that his staff had rarely heard before. Within 20 minutes, the presidential convoy was assembled in the secure compound's courtyard. Black jeeps with reinforced armor plating, military trucks filled with elite soldiers, and 2 fully equipped ambulances stood ready. The vehicle's engines hummed quietly in the night air as Traoré emerged from the residence, now dressed in military fatigues instead of his usual presidential attire. His eyes were alert and focused, reflecting the determination of a man who had made an irrevocable decision. "Where are we heading, sir?" asked General Abba, a weathered veteran with decades of military experience who had served as Traoré's most trusted security advisor. Traoré explained the phone call briefly, his words clipped and precise. "An anonymous caller just informed me that over 200 children are being held captive in a hidden gold mine. We're going to find them and bring them home." Commander Idris, a young but highly capable officer known for his tactical expertise, frowned as he absorbed this information. "If this is true, sir, then someone is getting rich off the suffering of these children. This is modern slavery in its most despicable form." Yes, Traoré replied grimly. And tonight, it ends. The convoy moved swiftly through Ouagadougou's empty streets, their headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. As they left the city limits, the landscape began to change dramatically. The paved roads gave way to dirt tracks, and the scattered lights of urban life disappeared behind them, replaced by the vast darkness of the West African night. The air grew thicker and more humid as they ventured deeper into rural areas. Dense clusters of trees lined both sides of the road, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out much of the moonlight. They passed through several remote villages where mud-brick houses stood silent and dark, their inhabitants long since retired for the night. At 2:10 a.m., after nearly 3 hours of driving through increasingly rough terrain, they reached the abandoned timber mill mentioned by the anonymous caller. The structure was exactly as described, a crumbling monument to failed industry, with a partially collapsed roof and rusted machinery scattered around its perimeter like mechanical bones. "This has to be it," Traoré said, stepping out of his jeep and surveying the desolate scene. Behind the mill, barely visible in the darkness, was indeed a narrow path that disappeared into the dense brush. He began walking toward the path, and his men followed in disciplined silence. Using only small flashlights to guide their way, the group of nearly 40 soldiers and medical personnel made their way through the thick forest. The sounds of the night surrounded them, the chirping of crickets, the distant call of an owl, and the rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. After almost an hour of careful navigation through increasingly dense vegetation, they began to hear something that made everyone stop in their tracks. Faint metallic sounds were drifting through the trees, the clanking of tools, the scraping of metal against stone, and what sounded like the low hum of generators. Traoré raised his hand, signaling for complete silence. Everyone crouched low as they moved forward with extreme caution. What they discovered when they finally reached a vantage point overlooking a natural depression. In the forest floor was a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Spread out below them was an illegal, open-pit mining operation. The area was poorly lit with scattered floodlights powered by small, noisy generators. Armed guards wandered around lazily, completely unaware that danger was approaching from the darkness above. But what struck President Traoré most forcefully were the children. Some were buried up to their waists in muddy pits, digging with small rusted tools that looked more like toys than proper mining equipment. Others were carrying heavy sacks of sand and ore, their young faces covered in dust and grime. None of them wore shoes, and many were dressed in torn, filthy clothing that hung loosely on their malnourished frames. The sight that nearly broke Traoré's composure was a young boy who collapsed while carrying a bucket of dirty water. He fell to his knees in the mud, clearly unable to continue, but no one came to help him. Instead, one of the guards shouted at him and delivered a vicious kick to his ribs, demanding that he get up and continue working. But the boy couldn't move. He was too weak, too exhausted, too broken. Traoré felt his chest tighten with rage and his hands clench into fists. In a barely audible whisper, he turned to Commander Idris. "Move in! No noise, no mercy for those guards, but protect the children at all costs." The rescue operation began with the precision of a Swiss watch. Traoré's men had trained for scenarios like this, and they moved like shadows through the mining site. At exactly 3:42 a.m., Commander Idris gave the signal that would change everything. Execute. A series of coordinated explosions echoed through the night as smoke grenades detonated around the perimeter of the mine. The guards, caught completely off guard, panicked and ran in all directions only to find themselves surrounded by armed soldiers who had anticipated every possible escape route. Warning shots were fired into the air, and within 3 minutes the entire site was secured. Every armed guard had been subdued and restrained. The generators were shut off, plunging the area into darkness except for the professional lighting equipment that the rescue team had brought with them. The children, terrified and confused by the sudden chaos, dropped their tools and huddled together in groups. Many of them thought this was just another group of dangerous men coming to hurt them. They had been conditioned to expect only cruelty from adults. "Please don't hurt us," cried a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old, her voice breaking with terror. But then President Traoré slowly walked into the cleared area. He moved with deliberate calm, his hands visible and his voice gentle as he spoke loud enough for all the children to hear. "My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am your president, and today I have come to take you home. You are safe now. No one will ever hurt you again." The children froze, staring at this man who spoke with such authority yet seemed so different from the cruel guards they had known. Some blinked in disbelief, uncertain if this was real or just another dream that would turn into a nightmare. Others began to cry, not from fear this time, but from an overwhelming mixture of hope and disbelief. A young boy who appeared to be about 7 years old fell to his knees and began sobbing uncontrollably. "They told us we would die here," he said through his tears. "They said nobody cared about us, that nobody would ever come to save us." Traoré walked over to the boy and knelt down beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "They lied to you. I care about you, and you are not going to die. You are going to live. You are going to grow strong, and you are going to have a future full of possibilities." As more children began to break down emotionally, some fainting from exhaustion, others collapsing from malnutrition, the president immediately called for his medical team to begin emergency care. "Start feeding them slowly and carefully," he ordered. "Get the weakest ones into the ambulances immediately. These children have been through hell, and we need to treat them with the utmost care and compassion." Hot food, clean water, and warm blankets were distributed quickly and efficiently. The medical team, experienced in emergency response, began treating injuries, checking for fevers, and administering oral rehydration solutions to combat severe dehydration. The condition of some of these children was heartbreaking. Many had untreated infections that had been festering for weeks. Others showed signs of severe malnutrition, distended bellies, hollow eyes, and stick-thin limbs. One girl's hand was bleeding from cuts that had never been properly cleaned or bandaged. A boy's back was covered with whip marks from beatings he had endured for not working fast enough. A small girl gripped President Traoré's hand tightly and whispered with desperation, "Please don't leave us here. Please don't let them take us back." "I won't," he replied firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you that." As dawn broke over the illegal mining site, the sun rose not on gold, but on hope. Traoré looked around at the scene. Dozens of children receiving medical care, being fed proper food for the first time in months, and beginning to believe that their nightmare might actually be over. "These children are the soul of our nation," he said to his men, his voice heavy with emotion. "Look at what greed has done to them. Look at how they've been treated like disposable objects instead of human beings with infinite worth and potential." He turned to face his soldiers directly. "We will not rest until we find every single person responsible for this atrocity. We will work together, and we will fight for justice with everything we have." The soldiers saluted with genuine respect and determination. "Yes, Mr. President." By 6 a.m., all the children had been safely evacuated to the convoy vehicles. The mine was sealed off as a crime scene, and evidence collection teams were already photographing everything and gathering materials that would be crucial for the prosecutions that would inevitably follow. Surveillance drones flew overhead, capturing aerial footage of the entire operation for documentation purposes. As the convoy began its journey back to the capital, many of the children slept peacefully for the first time in months. Others gazed at President Traoré as if he were a miracle made flesh, and in many ways he was exactly that, because that night a president had not waited for reports or bureaucratic investigations. He had heard the cry of his people and had descended personally into the darkness to bring them into the light. The rescue mission was complete, but this was only the beginning of a much larger battle for truth and justice. 1 week had passed since the heroic rescue of more than 200 children from the illegal gold mine. President Ibrahim Traoré had personally led the operation that had saved these young lives and had moved them to a secure, well-guarded temporary shelter in Ouagadougou where they were receiving comprehensive care, Medical professionals were treating the weakest children around the clock. Trauma counselors were working with those who had been psychologically damaged by their experiences. Clean clothes, hot meals, comfortable beds, and most importantly, safety and dignity were being provided to every child. For the first time in months, many of them had begun to smile again, to play simple games, and to believe that there might be a future worth living. However, unknown to the president and his security team, danger still lurked in the shadows like a venomous snake waiting to strike. The criminals behind the illegal gold mining operation had not been fully identified or captured. These were wealthy, powerful men with deep connections throughout West Africa, and they were seething with rage over what had transpired. The rescue mission had completely destroyed their profitable operation and exposed their secrets to the world. They had lost millions of dollars in revenue. Their forced labor supply had been eliminated, and most of their security personnel were now in government custody facing serious criminal charges. But rather than retreat or surrender, these men decided to seek revenge, not through violence, which would be too risky and too obvious, but through something far more insidious and potentially more destructive. An elaborate campaign of lies and misinformation designed to destroy President Traoré's reputation and credibility. 2 days later, without the knowledge of the presidential security detail, several of these criminal masterminds disguised themselves as reporters from what appeared to be a legitimate international media organization. They arrived at the children's shelter in 2 white vans bearing the logo of a fabricated humanitarian group, complete with professional-looking press credentials and camera equipment. They brought candy, toys, and what seemed like genuine concern for the children's welfare. The guards at the shelter were supposed to deny them entry without explicit presidential authorization, but corruption had already begun to seep into the system. One guard, who was responsible for security at the main entrance, had been quietly bribed with more money than he would normally earn in 6 months. "You have 30 minutes, the corrupted guard whispered as he pocketed the cash. "Be quick and don't cause any problems." Once inside the shelter, these false journalists approached several of the children with carefully practiced manipulation tactics. They spoke softly and kindly, pretending to be concerned humanitarians who only wanted to help. "We are here to protect you," they said with fake sympathy. "But the truth is that you are still in danger, and the world needs to know about it." The children, still traumatized and confused by everything they had experienced, looked uncertain. One boy asked, "What do you mean? We're safe now, aren't we?" The fake reporter shook his head gravely. "That man who claimed to rescue you, he's not really your president. He's actually the boss of another gold mine, just like the one you escaped from. He used soldiers to take you from one mine so he could force you to work in his mine instead. This place isn't safe. You're just being used again." The children fell silent, processing this shocking claim. One girl spoke up hesitantly, "But he said his name was President Ibrahim Traoré. He was kind to us." The false journalist shook his head again with practiced deception. "He lied to you. The real president would be too busy with important government business to come personally into the forest. You were just tricked by another criminal who wants to exploit you." Then they made their most manipulative request. They asked the children to speak in front of their cameras and to repeat the lies they had just been told. "Tell everyone how you're still being forced to work," they coached. "Tell them that the man who took you is still using you as slaves. If you do this, the whole world will see your pain and suffering. They will come to rescue you properly and take you to a much better place, maybe even to Europe or America. Don't you want to be truly free?" Driven by fear, confusion, and the false hope of being taken to a better life, several of the children agreed to participate in this deception. Through their tears, they repeated the lies they had been fed. "The man who said he rescued us is still using us," sobbed one boy. "He's not really our president. He's a bad man who tricks children." Another child added, "He brought us here to work again, just in a different place. They told us we were safe, but we're not. Please, someone help us escape from here too." A little girl looked directly into the camera and pleaded, "The world needs to save us from this man. We thought he was good, but he lied to us just like all the others." The fake journalists quickly packed up their equipment and left the shelter, satisfied with the footage they had captured. Within hours, the video was uploaded to multiple fake news websites and social media platforms with inflammatory headlines designed to go viral. President of Burkina Faso exposed. Read one caption. Rescued children claim he's using them for illegal gold mining. Shocking testimony reveals the truth. Within 24 hours, the video had indeed gone viral, reaching millions of viewers across Africa and around the world. International media outlets began picking up the story without proper verification. Twitter and Facebook were flooded with outraged comments from people who believed they were witnessing genuine testimonies of continued abuse. I knew it. This guy is no different from any other African dictator. How can a president lie to children like this? This is disgusting! He's probably stealing gold to enrich his own family while using child slaves. Public opinion began to shift rapidly, with many people who had previously praised Traoré's rescue mission now condemning him as a fraud and a criminal. Inside the presidential palace, President Traoré sat in stunned silence, watching the viral video on his computer screen. His hands were clenched into tight fists, and his face reflected a mixture of pain, anger, and profound confusion. "What is this?" he asked his security advisor, his voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. "Who authorized a camera crew to enter the shelter? Who gave them permission to speak with the children?" The advisor looked down at his shoes in embarrassment. "We're still investigating, sir. It appears that some of the guards may have been bribed to allow access." The president's voice rose with indignation. "Are you telling me that someone walked into a government facility, lied to traumatize children, filmed them repeating those lies, and posted it for the entire world to see, and nobody stopped them?" The room fell into uncomfortable silence as the full scope of the security failure became apparent. President Traoré stood up abruptly, his chair sliding backward. "This is worse than any bullet they could fire at me. This is a bullet made of lies, aimed directly at the truth and at the trust of our people." He looked at the screen again, his expression filled with anguish. "These are the same children I knelt beside in that mine. I held their hands. I fed them with my own hands, and now they think I'm their enemy." He turned to face his assembled staff. "This cannot continue. We must act quickly and decisively before the entire world turns against us and before these lies completely destroy any chance of justice for these children." That evening, Traoré convened an emergency national security meeting. All senior security officials, intelligence chiefs, and child protection officers were summoned to the palace for an urgent briefing. "They want to destroy my reputation," he told the assembled group. "They want to destroy the hope that this country represents to its people. But we will not let them succeed." He then issued specific orders: investigate the fake journalists, identify the corrupted guards, strengthen security around all the children, and most importantly, trace the source of the viral video back to its origins. Meanwhile, throughout the capital and in cities across the country, people were divided in their reactions. Some took to the streets demanding answers and explanations. Others gathered in support of Traoré, insisting that they still believed in his integrity and leadership. International news organizations began requesting interviews and statements. Foreign human rights organizations started asking pointed questions about the situation. The entire country was now under a cloud of suspicion and confusion, with citizens unsure who to believe or trust. Back at the children's shelter, President Traoré made a decision that would prove crucial to exposing the truth. He decided to visit the children again, but this time in complete secrecy. No cameras, no guards, no official protocol. Just himself and one trusted nurse who had been working with the children since their rescue. When the children saw him enter their dormitory, they became visibly tense. Some looked frightened, others backed away from him. The lies they had been told and then repeated on camera had created genuine confusion and fear in their minds. A young girl whispered nervously, "You came back?" Traoré looked slowly around the room, taking in their changed reactions to his presence. "Yes, I came because I heard that you were suffering again. But I'm not angry with any of you. I just want to understand what happened. And I want to hear the truth from your own voices." He knelt down on the floor, making himself less intimidating and more approachable. "Do you remember the night when I found you? The night when you were cold, hungry, and scared in that terrible place?" The children nodded, their expressions softening slightly as they recalled that night. "Do you remember that I told you that you are the future of this nation and that no one would ever hurt you again?" They nodded again, more confidently this time. "Then please," he said gently, his voice filled with genuine care and concern, "if someone came here and told you lies about me, I want you to tell me about it. I can handle the truth, whatever it is. Just please be honest with me." A small boy stepped forward hesitantly. A man came with a camera. "He said you weren't really the president," another child added. "He told us that you just took us from one mine so you could make us work in your mine instead." Traoré closed his eyes and took a deep breath, processing the full extent of the manipulation these children had been subjected to. "And did you believe him?" The first boy looked down at the floor. "We didn't know what to believe. They gave us candy and said that if we talked to their camera, the whole world would come to rescue us and maybe take us to Europe or America, where we could be really free." A girl spoke up. "They promised us that we would never have to work again if we just said those things on camera." Traoré stood up slowly, his heart heavy with the realization of how these innocent children had been manipulated and used as weapons against him. "My children," he said softly, "listen to me carefully. I am your president. I came to that mine that night because I love this nation and I love all of you. You are not tools to be used by anyone. You are not slaves. You are not objects. You are my responsibility, and no matter what the world says about me, I will protect you with my life if necessary." The children began to cry again, but this time it was from guilt and confusion rather than fear. One of the older boys approached him slowly. "We're sorry. We didn't know what was right. We thought we were doing something good." Traoré placed his hand on the boy's shoulder with infinite gentleness. "I forgive you completely. But now we must all work together to correct the lies that have been spread. We must help the world understand what really happened." That night, a comprehensive plan was developed. A truth campaign would begin immediately, featuring real journalists with verified credentials operating under strict security protocols. The genuine story would be told by the president, by the children, and by independent witnesses who had been present during the original rescue operation. But time was running out. The enemies were still out there, watching and waiting and planning their next move. President Traoré knew that his response needed to be bold, swift, and absolutely convincing. 3 days had passed since the fake video had spread across the globe, and public opinion remained dangerously divided. Some international observers were calling for independent investigations, while others were sending threatening messages to the Burkina Faso government based on the false information they had been fed. But while confusion and doubt filled the airwaves, President Ibrahim Traoré remained focused on his mission. He understood that if he didn't act decisively and immediately, the trust of his people, both within the country and internationally, would be permanently destroyed. The children were still receiving care at the secure facility, but now they were surrounded by multiple layers of additional security. Trusted soldiers had replaced the corrupted guards, and every visitor was thoroughly screened and verified before being allowed anywhere near the children. Inside the presidential palace, Traoré met again with his inner circle. His eyes showed fatigue, but his voice remained clear and determined. "We cannot sit passively while our reputation is dragged through the mud by lies and deception," he declared. "We must tell our side of the story, and we must do it in a way that cannot be disputed or manipulated." General Abba suggested, "Sir, the people need to hear from the children again, but this time, the truth must be completely protected from interference." The president nodded firmly. "We will organize a press conference unlike any other. It will be raw, unedited, and completely transparent. The children will speak freely in their own words, and we will let the world hear exactly what happened on that night and in the days that followed." A carefully selected media team was assembled, consisting of both local and international journalists with solid reputations for accuracy and integrity. They were thoroughly vetted and invited under complete presidential supervision and control. The day of the press event arrived. Cameras were set up in a clean, simple room at the children's shelter. There were no decorations, no fancy lighting, no political staging, just chairs, microphones, and a commitment to truth. The children, now properly clothed and visibly healthier than they had been weeks earlier, still showed some physical scars from their ordeal, but there was light returning to their eyes and hope beginning to replace despair. President Traoré stood quietly in the back of the room, watching and listening as the children prepared to speak their truth to the world. The first child to approach the microphone was Jonathan, a 10-year-old boy who had shown remarkable resilience throughout his recovery. He walked slowly to the front of the room, looked directly into the cameras, and began to speak with a maturity that belied his young age. The night when the soldiers came to the mine, "I thought it was the end," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I thought they were coming to beat us or maybe kill us, just like the guards had always threatened they would do." He paused to collect himself, then continued. "But then this man," he pointed toward President Traoré, "came forward and said, 'You are free now. No one will ever hurt you again.' I didn't believe him at first. We had been lied to so many times before. But when they gave us real food, when they treated our wounds, when they told us we would never have to work in that terrible place again, I knew it was real." Jonathan's voice grew stronger as he continued his testimony. "When some men came here last week with cameras, they lied to us. They told us that the man who rescued us was actually a bad person. We were confused and scared because we didn't know who to believe. They gave us candy and toys and promised that if we said certain things on camera, the whole world would help us and maybe take us to better countries." He looked directly into the camera. "I want to say that I am sorry for believing those lies and for repeating them. And I want the whole world to know that this man," he pointed again to Traoré, "is our president, and he saved our lives. He is a good man who risked his own safety to help children he had never met." One by one, the other children came forward to share their experiences. Some cried as they spoke, others held hands with their friends for courage and support. They talked about the pain and suffering they had endured in the illegal mines, the beatings, the starvation, the fear that they would die in darkness and be forgotten by the world. They explained in their own words how they had been deceived into making false statements, and they described how their lives had been completely transformed since the rescue operation. The room was completely silent except for the voices of the children and the quiet hum of the cameras. The assembled journalists, many of whom were parents themselves, listened with growing emotion as the true story unfolded before them. Finally, President Traoré stepped forward to address the cameras directly. The room became utterly quiet as he prepared to speak. "I did not come here today to defend myself," he began, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I came here to defend the truth and to defend these children who have already suffered more than any child should ever have to endure." He gestured toward the children sitting behind him. "These young people were slaves hidden in the forest, treated worse than animals, robbed of their childhood and their dignity. They were forced to work in conditions that would be considered criminal in any civilized society." His voice grew more passionate as he continued. "I led that rescue mission personally because I believe that no child should be buried in darkness and despair, while the rest of us live in comfort and safety. I did not need to steal gold from children. My wealth is not measured in precious metals. My true wealth is in the future of this nation, and these children are that future." He pointed emphatically toward the young faces looking up at him. "Those who created fake news, those who bribed our guards and lied to the world, know this: we are coming for you. Not with hatred or revenge, but with justice and the full force of law." The entire room erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. The children rushed toward him, embracing him tightly as cameras captured the genuine emotion and connection between them. The video was broadcast live and immediately reached millions of viewers around the world. Within just 2 hours, it had been shared across every major social media platform and picked up by international news organizations. Across the globe, people who had previously doubted President Traoré's motives began to believe again. Renowned human rights organizations published statements supporting the president's actions. International leaders called to congratulate him on his courage and leadership. The lies were beginning to crumble, but President Traoré knew his work was far from finished. The day after the successful Truth Campaign press conference, President Traoré launched what he called Operation Golden. Truth, a comprehensive investigation into all illegal mining activities. Throughout Burkina Faso, secret agents were deployed across the country to gather intelligence. Lists of suspected businessmen and criminal organizations were compiled and analyzed. Border checkpoints were activated to prevent key suspects from fleeing the country. The corrupted guards who had allowed the fake journalists into the children's shelter were arrested one by one and interrogated thoroughly. In a small town near the original mining site, a raid was conducted on a hidden safe house. Inside, investigators discovered documents that revealed a shocking truth about the scope of the criminal operation. They found lists of children who had been purchased like commodities, records of payments made to various accomplices, and clear evidence of systematic bribery of government officials. One man, a former government contractor named Marcel Ouedraogo, was caught trying to flee the country with suitcases full of cash and incriminating documents. Under interrogation, he confessed to his role in the conspiracy. "I was just following orders," he pleaded. "They paid me to stay quiet and to help them move children from villages to the mining sites. I never wanted to hurt anyone." President Traoré ordered that all properties linked to the criminal network be immediately seized by the government. Bank accounts were frozen, assets were confiscated, and every financial transaction connected to the child trafficking operation was traced and documented. But the battle was not just physical, it was also a war for truth and justice in the court of public opinion. The president ordered a national tour of schools where he would travel from one educational institution to another, speaking directly to students about what had happened and teaching them how to protect themselves and their communities from similar predators. At one school in a rural village, a student stood up during the president's presentation and asked, "Mr. President, why didn't people believe you at first when the fake video came out?" Traoré smiled sadly but thoughtfully before responding. "Because, my young friend, the truth is often slow to emerge, but it is always stronger in the end. Lies can spread quickly like wildfire, but they burn out just as fast when confronted with facts and genuine evidence." As the days passed, public sentiment began to shift decisively in favor of the president. The same people who had been shouting in anger were now applauding with admiration and respect. A woman at a local market told a passing journalist, "We almost lost faith in our leader, but this man did not run away or hide when things got difficult. He stayed strong for his children and for all of us. This is what real leadership looks like." Back at the children's shelter, something wonderful was happening. The rescued children received new school uniforms and supplies. President Traoré announced that each of them would receive a full scholarship for their education, covering everything from primary school through university if they chose to continue their studies. "You will not merely survive," he told them during a private visit. "You will thrive, you will succeed, and you will become leaders who will help build a better future for this nation." Plans were also developed to construct a special school called the House of Light, exclusively for the rescued children, where they would receive specialized education, counseling, and protection as they healed from their traumatic experiences and prepared for bright futures. But President Traoré understood that the battle was far from over. Evil always finds new ways to hide and adapt, and the masterminds behind the original mining operation still had significant influence and resources at their disposal. He called another emergency meeting with his security chiefs. "We have exposed their lies and begun healing the children," he said with determination. "Now it is time to finish this once and for all." His next step would be a nationally televised address to name the specific individuals behind the criminal syndicate and to reveal the full scope of their operations to the world. However, before he could make this announcement public, he received an unmarked envelope that had somehow bypassed all security protocols and appeared on his desk. There was no return address, no signature, just a single sentence written in block letters. "If you speak again, the next child to disappear will be on your head." The room fell silent as President Traoré held the letter and studied its threatening message. He looked at his assembled team of advisors and security personnel, and his voice was steady and resolute as he spoke. They are desperate now. They are trying to intimidate us into silence. But I will not back down, and I will not be silenced by threats. With that declaration, the fire of determination in his eyes burned even brighter than before. 2 days after President Ibrahim Traoré received the anonymous threat, tension in the presidential palace reached a critical level. Security was tripled around the children's shelter, around schools throughout the country, and around every child under government protection. His senior advisors were pleading with him to exercise caution. "Sir, perhaps we should wait," suggested one of his most trusted counselors. "Let things calm down for a while before we take any more aggressive action." But President Traoré looked them directly in the eyes and responded with unwavering conviction. "No. If I remain silent now, they win. And I refuse to be silent while children anywhere in this country remain in danger." He held the threatening letter in his hand and read its words aloud again. "If you speak again, the next child to disappear will be on your head." Then he closed his eyes for a moment and whispered, "God is watching you, and justice will find you." What the criminal masterminds didn't realize was that one of their own inner circle was growing tired of the violence and corruption. A man named Roland Sankara, who had once been a trusted partner in their gold smuggling operation, had begun to feel overwhelming guilt about his participation in these crimes. He had seen the tears of the enslaved children with his own eyes. He had witnessed how President Traoré had rescued them with such courage and compassion. Most importantly, Roland had a young daughter of his own, and every time he looked at her innocent face, he was reminded of the pain and suffering in the eyes of those mining victims. That night, Roland made a life-changing decision. He quietly left his home under cover of darkness and drove to a secret military base outside the capital. He walked up to the guard post and made a request that would alter everything. "I need to speak with President Traoré's special task force," he told the surprised guard. "I have information about the people who sent that threatening letter, but you must protect me. My life will be in serious danger if they discover what I'm about to do." Within an hour, he was sitting in a secure interrogation room across from Commander Idris, who studied him with intense scrutiny. "Who are you, and why should we trust anything you tell us?" the commander asked. "My name is Roland Sankara. I have been working with the criminal organization that sent that threatening letter to the president. I know everything, their real names, their faces, where they live, where they hide their money, and where they keep all their incriminating documents." The room became completely silent as the implications of this confession sank in. Roland continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "I am tired of being part of something so evil. I have a daughter, and when I look at her, all I can see are the faces of those children who were suffering in that mine. I cannot continue living with this guilt." The next morning, President Traoré was briefed on Roland's confession. With a heavy heart, he listened to audio recordings that revealed the shocking truth about the scope of the criminal conspiracy. The mastermind behind the fake news campaign, the illegal mining operation, and the threatening letter was a wealthy businessman named Martin Damba. He had built his fortune through dirty gold mining, child labor exploitation, and systematic corruption of government officials. Now he was attempting to destroy the one man who stood in the way of his continued criminal activities. "Where is he now?" the president asked grimly. Roland's voice came through the recording. "He's hiding in a private compound near the border with Ghana. He has armed guards protecting him, but if you act quickly and decisively, you can capture him before he escapes the country." Without wasting a single moment, President Traoré authorized a special operations mission. "Move immediately. No mistakes, no mercy for him, but protect any innocent people who might be in that compound." That night, an elite team of soldiers launched a perfectly coordinated assault on Martin Damba's hideout. The operation was swift, clean, and decisive. Martin was captured while desperately trying to burn boxes of documents that contained evidence of his crimes. When he saw the soldiers breaking down his door, he actually laughed with arrogance and contempt. "So the little president sent his toy soldiers to come get me?" he sneered. The soldiers said nothing. They simply handcuffed him and transported him directly to the capital for immediate prosecution. The next morning, the entire nation watched as Martin Damba was led in chains into the courthouse. Camera flashes illuminated his face as reporters shouted questions, and crowds gathered to witness this moment of reckoning. The children at the shelter watched the news coverage on television and cheered when they saw their tormentor being brought to justice. "That's the man who lied about our president," exclaimed one girl, pointing at the screen. The trial proceeded rapidly because the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Documents, bank statements, recorded conversations, video footage, and Roland's complete confession were all presented to the court as proof of Martin's extensive criminal activities. Martin Damba was found guilty on multiple charges: human trafficking of children, illegal mining operations, spreading false information with intent to destabilize the government, making terrorist threats against the president, and systematic violation of human rights. The judge looked directly at Martin as he delivered the final verdict. "You have destroyed innocent lives for personal profit. You have used lies and deception to cover up your evil actions, but justice has finally caught up with you. Your crimes against children and against this nation are unforgivable." Martin Damba was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole or early release. As the judge's gavel struck the bench to make the sentence official, crowds throughout the country erupted in celebration. People danced in the streets. Social media was flooded with messages of gratitude and triumph, and a collective sense of justice and vindication swept across Burkina Faso. "Justice has won," wrote one citizen on Twitter. "Thank you, President Traoré, for never giving up on these children and for showing us what real leadership looks like." Later that evening, President Traoré addressed the nation in what would become one of his most memorable and inspiring speeches. "My fellow citizens," he began, his voice carrying the weight of everything they had all endured together, "we have witnessed evil in its most despicable form. We have felt fear, doubt, and confusion. But we have also demonstrated that when we stand together in pursuit of truth and justice, no force on earth can defeat us." He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. "Let this be a message to anyone who would harm children, spread lies to the world, or abuse their power for personal gain. Your days of freedom are numbered. We will find you. We will expose you. And we will bring you to justice." The camera panned to show some of the rescued children who were watching the speech live from their shelter. Some were crying tears of relief and happiness. Others were smiling with hope for the first time in their young lives. "These children," the president continued, gesturing toward them, "are not tools to be used. They are not workers or slaves or objects. They are not disposable. They are the heart and soul of our nation, and as long as I live and breathe, I will protect them with everything I have." The following day marked another milestone in this incredible story. The new House of Light School for the rescued children officially opened its doors. President Traoré visited on the first day of classes, walking hand in hand with the youngest boy, the same child who had collapsed from exhaustion in the mine on that first night. "Do you remember what I told you that night in the forest?" the president asked gently. The boy smiled brightly, his eyes now full of life and possibility. "You said I was going to live and be strong." Traoré smiled back with genuine warmth and pride. "That's right. And now you're going to learn, you're going to grow, and someday you might even become a leader who helps other children just like yourself." As the camera pulled back to show the children entering their new school with books and supplies in their hands instead of mining tools, the narrator's voice provided a final reflection on this extraordinary tale. In a world where powerful people often exploit the vulnerable, where lies can spread faster than truth, and where corruption can seem impossible to defeat, one man chose to risk everything for the sake of children he had never met. President Ibrahim Traoré proved that courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to justice can triumph over even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies. The children who were once enslaved in darkness are now walking into light, education, and hope. The criminals who thought they were untouchable are now facing justice. And a nation that was briefly divided by lies has been reunited by truth. This story serves as a reminder that in our interconnected world, where false information can travel around the globe in minutes, we must always be vigilant about verifying what we hear and see. We must never allow sensational headlines or emotional manipulation to override our commitment to facts and evidence. Most importantly, this story proves that real leadership is not about political power or personal gain. It's about being willing to descend into the darkness to rescue those who cannot rescue themselves. It's about standing up for truth even when the whole world seems to be against you. It's about protecting the innocent even when it puts your own reputation and safety at risk. The gold that was stolen from those mines will eventually be spent and forgotten, but the lives that were saved, the truth that was preserved, and the example of courage that was set will inspire people for generations to come. Sometimes, in our cynical age, we forget that heroes can be real. This story reminds us that they are, and that they walk among us, ready to act when justice calls. 6 months after the dramatic rescue and trial, a follow-up report showed the remarkable transformation that had taken place in the lives of the rescued children. All 200-plus children were now healthy, well-educated, and thriving in safe environments. Many had been reunited with family members who had been searching for them. Others had been placed with loving foster families who understood their special needs. The House of Light School had become a model educational institution with international organizations sending delegations to study its innovative approaches to trauma recovery and accelerated learning. President Traoré had established a new government department dedicated specifically to child protection, with a mandate to investigate any reports of exploitation and to ensure that no child in Burkina Faso would ever again suffer the horrors of forced labor. Martin Damba's extensive criminal network had been completely dismantled, with dozens of additional arrests made throughout West Africa. The illegal mining sites had been permanently closed and converted into legitimate community development projects. Roland Sankara, the whistleblower whose conscience had ultimately brought down the criminal conspiracy, was living under government protection with his family, having received a full pardon in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation. Most remarkably, several of the rescued children had become advocates themselves, traveling to schools and community centers to share their stories and teach other young people how to recognize and avoid trafficking schemes. Jonathan, the 10-year-old boy who had spoken so courageously at the Truth Campaign press conference, was now excelling in his studies and had expressed his ambition to become a lawyer so he could help President Traoré fight bad people who hurt children. The story of President Ibrahim Traoré and the Great Gold Mine Rescue had become more than just a news event. It had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of moral courage, and a reminder that in the eternal struggle between good and evil, good can win when people of integrity are willing to stand up and fight. As the president had promised on that first night in the forest, the children not only survived, they thrived, they succeeded, and they began to fulfill their destiny as the bright future of their nation. The darkness had been defeated by light. Lies had been conquered by truth, and hope had triumphed over despair. And in a small classroom in the House of Light School, where rescued children now learned mathematics and literature instead of digging for gold in dangerous mines, a simple inscription on the wall captured the essence of this remarkable story. Every child is precious. Every truth is powerful. Every act of courage matters. The end.